Hi, I'm Sai. Welcome to my channel called Nugget of Wisdom. So this video is all about what it means to be a consumer. Because I've noticed in lots of ways when I look at and I listen to and I read books about all of the sort of complicated problems we have in the world, whether it's to do with health, nutrition, the environment, politics, relationships. I see these brilliant people, and I've learned about brilliant people, and I found out about books that have been published decades ago that were like just amazing books to read, and have given me such an insight into some of the issues and problems I might be trying to figure out in my life. But a couple of things that really bugged me. One was, how come I hadn't heard about these books before? And the second thing that bugged me is that a lot of people who are doing these brilliant podcasts and publishing all this brilliant information, to me, they're often looking at effects rather than causes. In other words, I always felt that, there are issues around relationships between men and women. There are issues around the foods we eat, the preservatives and the plastics. There are issues around healthcare. There are issues around all sorts of stuff, consumerism, waste. But what's at the core of this? What sort of philosophy or culture or story is really at the core of this? And the more I thought about it, and the more I really analysed it, the more I realised it's all about consumerism. Basically, what has happened to us is all of the wisest people in the world who have developed and learned about human behaviour and how we as human beings like to operate so that we're happy and we can live a good life and we can be fulfilled. These people have kind of been sort of left into a sort of niche world where it's just a niche thing that they do and they're known within their circles. But if what they're saying is useful to consumerism, then they're embraced by the consumerist system. What I mean by consumerism is basically the capitalist system of, market forces and, the race to the bottom, and basically turning everything into transactional, into a commodity. Everything is bought and sold. There's a price on everything. And so you've got lots of fantastic people who have had great insights in human behavior and everything else. They've kind of just been left to most people don't know about them, because you have to remember, up until very recently, really, television was media was dominated by a small number of select groups of newspapers and terrestrial or satellite television companies. And those companies are very, very much linked to agendas that revolve around money, either directly or indirectly. So advertising. So the television companies need eyeballs to get advertising. Politics, the politicians need money to fund their political parties, and they're also being heavily lobbied by big companies. So basically what has happened to us is we have kind of been completely dehumanized by the system. And we've been turned from human beings into consumers. When I said turned, we've never actually turned. We've never been consumers, but we've been typecast that way. So the people who run and operate and pull the strings of services and how the Western world operates, they basically are totally focused on a transactional model of society. And I'm not going to knock them for this. I'm not saying it's good or bad, and I can understand why it's happened. First of all, even I go back into the 1970s. In Ireland, it was a very poor country. Go back just a few decades, in most places, people were poor, and they had to struggle to get enough money to, put food on the table, to have heating in their homes, sanitation. And because of our incredible ability to think, use our intellectual minds to think and come up with all sorts of amazing technologies and inventions, we've managed to basically figure out how to have all the basics of life that we need pretty much universally. And where it's not universal, it's deliberate. It's not like we today in this country and in the UK and in all the Western countries in the Western world, we could not eliminate poverty. In fact, through COVID, that's exactly what happened. All the homeless were taken off the streets. People were at home getting their furlough, 80% of their salaries. That actually happened. But the interesting thing about us is that we've kind of, it's like the pendulum swinging the other way. We as a society where having the basics of life was really important to us, managing to get that, in our heads, we're still stuck in survival mode. And we've created the most incredible system for survival, which is basically make everything transactional. We will trade everything. In this country, luckily, some things haven't been put on the sort of consumerist menu, like the healthcare system, but pretty much mostly everything else has. And what it's done is, first of all, it's created a culture where we subconsciously believe that every kind of human relationship we have to have has to have some sort of transaction to it. So even somebody saying, hi, it's a lovely day. Well, you go into the coffee shop and you pay the money over and you go, thank you, sir, here's your coffee, see you again. And you can feel it in society that people are caught up in this kind of stereotype. I am a consumer. It's actually the most insulting description you could make of a human being. I mean, you wouldn't do it with your dog. You wouldn't call your dog just a consumer. And what's interesting is we've just accepted this because we've grown into it. And then what's happened is the consumerist system has basically just raced to the bottom to try and figure out ways of turning everything into some sort of transactional process. And then it's fed us with these stories of how if we do all these things, we can be rich, we can have loads of money, we can be successful. And through media and movies and everything, it's created stories that basically make us feel unhappy. And or create anxiety or create wanting. And of course, you think about this. If you're in a big company, corporation, you're making sweets. You can keep adding sugar to the sweets and preservatives and colours and flavourings. And you can kind of go, oh, they're probably okay, but they may not be. So this is where you get the problem with the unhealthy foods, but that drives the sales up. And when you get to a point where you can't do any more with that, you can basically start to use all sorts of get models to advertise the sweets, famous actors, convince young people when they're very sort of open to being, an impressionable, to look at this particular sweet and go, if I eat this sweet, I'm cool. I'll be successful. And really, of course, on top of that, you can decide, well, it's too expensive to make the sweets, so we'll make them in some other country where the labour is cheaper. We'll ship them across. Don't worry about the fuels because the fuel is cheap. So the whole of society starts to get configured around a race to the bottom. A fundamentally crazy idea. Instead of going, oh my gosh, we have done this amazing job. We've taken most people out of poverty. We've created this an amazing society. Get generations of people who lived 100, 200 years ago to sort of, if you could, in a thought experiment, get them to come to this society we live in now and look around. They'd be gobsmacked. They'd go into a supermarket. They just wouldn't believe it. At the choice and the varieties of foods and everything that we have. And instead of going, we made it. Now we want to make sure that this is everybody has enough to eat, everybody has healthcare, everybody is heating, and we can use even newer technologies to make the world an even better, more prosperous, more more beautiful place. We've just gone off like we're in drugs and just continued with the race to the bottom. And I say we're all kind of responsible here. The problem with a lot of the people, as I said to you in other videos that talk about this stuff, is they will say it's the capitalists, it's the corporations, it's the banks, and they're kind of right. But I ask everybody, I ask them, if you could be in a position where you were head of a corporation, if you were a big banker and you were getting paid £1 million a year, millions of pounds a year, and you could rip people off, but you didn't really know you were ripping people off, and you thought, well, maybe it's okay, and somebody told you, well, it's probably okay. Would you do it or not do it? I'd say I wouldn't do it, but I can't guarantee that. Especially if I was brought up with the stories that are told about these things. So we're perceived as consumers, which is really an insult to ourselves, because we're much, much, much more than that. And it's pretty clear we are. I mean, look around the world, look at all the creatures and animals and everything else. Look at us. We're incredible beings. And the fact that we're not consumers, the conflict that it creates in us, is the meaning crisis. The meaning crisis. There must be more to it. There must be more to life. There must be more to this. Because yes, we like pleasure and we like to have food and heat and all these kinds of things and satisfy our needs. But there's much more to human beings than just that. And we all know it. And that's where the tension comes. So we end up living in a society where we've got all this stuff coming at us. But we're just not happy. And the messaging is, once you have these things, you'll be happy. But of course, in the consumerist model, that can never be. Because they want you to buy more. The idea that once you got something, you'd then be satisfied would destroy the economy. It would collapse. So you've got to get something, think it's going to make you happy, use it, eat it, whatever, use it, throw it away, whatever. Basically, consume it as quickly as possible and get another one. And to tempt you to get another one, they'll try and give you an even better one, a glossier one, a bigger one, a shinier one. And what happens is we completely enmeshed in this whole system that we're all born into, don't know any better. And then you have this undercurrent of serious unhappiness in society. And also highly destructive, because we have finite resources. The world is not infinite. We're on this incredible spaceship traveling, through the solar system at God knows what speeds and making all sorts of shapes and movements as it does. And it's finite. And our lives are finite. So the promise from the consumerist story can never fulfill. And it knows this. The people who run the system know this. Because not only do they know this, but they've taken all of the best psychological tricks about human behavior, about how our longings for things, how we are often motivated through a whole pile of physiological, mental processes that have gone on for thousands of years. And when the psychologists and the scientists come out and go, we did a test and we found this. We found this behavior in people that makes them rubberneck to something, makes them aspire to something, that makes them want to be part of a group, that makes them want to feel loved and needed. Instead of using that for the greater good of society, it's been used to go, now we can sell them more coat hooks. Now we can sell them more cars. Now we can get them to change their car much quicker because we can make the car so that they feel the car is part of them and they're part of the car. Now we know about ego and the ego self. We can use all sorts of tactics to get people just to buy more stuff. And so it's the same thing with the war between masculinity and femininity and women and men. Hey, Can you imagine it? If we lived in a world where basically we were just living as nature intended and we were all pretty happy and satisfied, the current economy would collapse. No one would be purchasing, not no one, but we'd be purchasing for our daily needs and so on, and sharing and reusing things and taking care of the tools and equipment that we have and making sure we weren't trashing stuff. But the economy has to keep growing. And basically, it wouldn't grow. It would probably level off. And maybe now and again it would drop down a bit because people wouldn't need it. There'd be sort of more resources than they required. And for our type of economy, capitalist economy, it's a disaster. So you got a system where the true peacefulness and happiness of human beings who are amazing, incredible, creative creatures cannot be satisfied with this sort of insatiable race to the bottom capitalist consumerist model. It did a great job at satisfying our basic needs and giving us all sorts of efficiencies and economies of scale and everything else when it came to making things and sharing technological advances. But once it reaches a certain point, it doesn't work anymore. But as a system, it has to keep growing and growing and growing, which also means that what it does is it eventually destroys, like a parasite. It destroys the very system that it's trying to basically, take resources from to make into goods and services so that people can have a better life. And we're at that tipping point now. We're at that tipping point where the system we have in place that really is the dominant force for defining who we are, which is we're consumers. And, consumers, basically we're like sheep. We go out there and we just munch and munch and munch all day long. And we really that's what we're about, consuming. Nothing else. And when the grass is gone, we put our heads up and go, there's no grass, and someone puts us into another field and consume. So that sort of story, that primary story in our society, basically is turning into a cancer and destroying us. Setting us all against each other. Basically, it makes us unhappy, unsatisfied, and full of anxiety and wanting. Because then we go out and we purchase more. And the more we purchase, the more the economy needs to find its way to get more resources from different places. The more competition there is, the bigger race to the bottom. And so the foods we eat and the devices we use and all of the things that we use in our consumerist life are sort of, coming to us with sort of dodgy associations. And you can see it in the supermarkets. I mean, really? If you went to any of the mainstream supermarkets in the UK today and you got a nutritionist in, somebody who's really understood food, understood toxicology, the packaging and the materials, understood the recycling, understood the waste, understood, what was really good for us to eat with the kind of lifestyles we have. Probably half the stuff in the supermarket, you just throw in the bin. So don't eat it. It's rubbish. If you distract all the additives and the sugars and the salts out of products that are sold in supermarkets, you probably you've got to know how many tons of white powder sitting in the car park of the supermarket. So, really, what I'm trying to say in this video is that fundamentally, the root cause of what's going on and the problems we have in our society are all based around the need to feed an insatiable capitalist system that identifies us as mindless consumers. But also we have to kind of believe that we're just meat machines. That everything's purposeless. There's no point in anything. Because what do? You just become a drug addict. You just eat more food from the freezer. You snack. You drink more. You take, antidepressants. You consume. You spend all your time on porn, watching TV, complaining. And then you sort of become this machine. You're just a machine. And that's even worse, is that it gets reinforced at every turn. It's being reinforced in the conventional world of technology and media. How to make our lives easier. How to make our lives so we don't have to do much. Oh, we can have an artificial intelligence system which will then render everything we do sort of, obsolete. So you don't have any purpose of any kind. And then the AI is all being touted that it's going to be more intelligent, it's going to be better. Humans will be obsolete. So it's constantly dehumanizing us and typecasting us as consumers. And the people who are doing that are human beings. The people who are using that incredible intelligence to manipulate the rest of us and do these amazing things with technology are also human beings who, by their own very narrative, are consumers. So what do? You stop being a consumer. It's as simple as that. You just stop being a consumer. You start to realize that you're much, much, much more than that. You're a beautiful being. You're an incredible being. No matter what age you are, what your level of ability, you as a human being are amazing. And then on top of that, you realize that all of the things, the consumerist things, and the messages you've been sent by the consumerist world about how to be happy with advertising and everything else, they're all nonsense. They're encouraging you to be a drug addict. They want you to drink that drink and then basically go, oh, it was great while I drank it. Now it's gone. I had the first sip, the second sip. It doesn't feel so great. I need another one. I need the new version. So all of that, we have got to get the hell out of it. And our economy won't collapse. It didn't collapse during COVID. It didn't collapse with the banking crisis. This is another myth that's put on us. But if we had a sustainable society, if we had healthy food, if we had, all the things that make our common sense to making our society and our world a better place, then everything would collapse. In reality, that'll never happen. It can't happen. Society can only collapse if we're stupid. And it's stupidity to create a society where its core messages and its values are all based on us being mindless machine consumers, meat machine consumers. In a finite world that cannot keep producing and making all the stuff that we need it to satisfy our drug addictions. And so fundamental change is required. And so you could say, oh, okay, well, it's never going to happen. It will have to happen at some stage. Either we start to take on board the incredible wisdom of incredible people who I will put some links to on my videos, who are starting to express the ways in which we could transform our society and change and evolve it. Either we just listen to them, get them all together in a room and say, okay, everything's open for discussion here. We can change the way these systems work. They're all created. They're all stories anyway. We can change the whole lot and we can rebuild it to suit the way our society is changing and the knowledge that we have and the recognition that we are beautiful, incredible beings that should never be typecast ever again as consumers. Yes, we need to consume, but it's not our identity to be consumers. I drive a car, but my identity isn't that I'm just a driver. I'm a lot more than that. So once we do that, and there's so much wisdom out there, and there's so much incredible creative ability in human beings to change all this stuff and to do it really quickly. If we do that, I think we have an amazing opportunity in the world, because we've already got so much creativity, intelligence, beauty, and spirituality. There's so many incredible spiritual teachers in the world who understand what it means to be a human being is not just being a consumer. If we don't grab their knowledge, grab their wisdom, we'll just crash at some stage. We all know this. It'll crash, because the natural world will just go, well, it's unsustainable. You can't go on like this, so you're off. You'll be kicked off. We'll be kicked off in some way. Whether it's through, killing each other in wars, or it's through starvation, or it's through climate issues. There's a whole range of things where we get to a point where we have so few skills, so little ability to take care of ourselves, we lack so much understanding of what it is to be resilient or sustainable, where we don't understand how to keep ourselves healthy physically and mentally, that we basically just go extinct. So we have that choice, and it's a simple choice. Am I this mindless consumer who has to just take for granted what this sort of crazy model of how we should live today that might have worked for a few decades and got us all out of poverty, great, but now just doesn't work anymore? How do we just say goodbye to this? So, in essence, consumerism, it's crazy, and whenever somebody refers to you as a consumer, you should just go, I'm not, thank you very much. But you'll see it everywhere. You'll see that it's just a common term that's used. And that tells you a lot about the nature of the mindset of the very powerful institutions and organizations in our world that are setting out how we all interact with each other and how we do business and everything else in the world. So thank you for listening to my video, and see you in my next one.